They called me a legacy bottleneck, then erased my name from the system without warning. I just smiled, because I knew they had just shot themselves in the knee. They thought I would leave quietly, but I was the one who signed the clause retaining full ownership of the $9 million contract. My name is Rachel Monroe, and until 3 weeks ago, I was the contract management director at Weston Dynamics, a biotechnology firm in Austin, Texas. For 7 years, I built their contract management system from scratch, turning chaotic paperwork into streamlined digital processes worth millions. At 38, I had become the cornerstone of the company's operational integrity, the invisible hand ensuring every deal was legally sound and financially optimal. That Tuesday morning began like any other. I arrived at 7:15 a.m., settled at my corner desk overlooking Lady Bird Lake, and started reviewing overnight contract notifications. The office was quiet, most staff wouldn't arrive for another hour. I cherished these moments of uninterrupted focus, scanning through pending amendments and incoming vendor agreements. At 8:30, my calendar pinged, Strategic Alignment Meeting, Travis Dale Efficiency Consultant. I sighed. Travis had been hired 2 months ago by Martin Glass, our CEO, to streamline outdated processes. In my experience, consultants like Travis were corporate grim reapers, assigned to identify what they considered excess, usually meaning people with institutional knowledge who commanded respectable salaries. I dialed into the video conference, and there he was, slick hair, aggressively white teeth, and a blue light blocking glasses that never left his face, even indoors. At 33, Travis represented everything I found insufferable about the new wave of corporate consultants, buzzwords in place of substance, and spreadsheets divorced from human consequences. "Rachel, thanks for jumping on," he said with practiced enthusiasm. "I've been mapping the contract management workflow and wanted to calibrate my understanding." "Happy to help," I replied, my tone professional despite my unease. Travis shared his screen, displaying a flowchart of interconnected boxes. "So, you're essentially the final approver on all vendor contracts over $10,000, correct?" "Yes, per the delegation of authority Martin approved in 2018. It ensures financial compliance and legal oversight." "Interesting," Travis said, tapping his pen against his desk. "Seems like a potential legacy bottleneck. Most companies I consult with have moved toward distributed approval matrices." There it was. Legacy bottleneck. Corporate speak for expensive employee we want to eliminate. I'd seen this playbook before. My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. The centralized approach has prevented several compliance issues and saved Weston approximately $2.7 million in contract disputes last year alone, I countered, citing figures from my annual report. Travis nodded absently. "Impressive, but we should explore more agile methodologies. I'll connect with you after I've completed my assessment." Over the next 2 weeks, small changes began accumulating. My system administrator privileges were downgraded without notice. Meeting invitations to strategic sessions stopped appearing in my calendar. When I mentioned these issues to my boss, Catherine Walsh, she waved them off as ET updates and calendar glitches. Then I discovered Amber Patel, a 23-year-old marketing assistant who joined the company 5 months earlier, had been granted temporary management access to the contract system I'd built. When I asked Catherine about this, she avoided eye contact. "Travis suggested we cross-train more staff on critical systems," she explained, her voice unnaturally bright. "Just standard business continuity planning." That evening, I stayed late, watching through my glass partition as Catherine, Travis, and Martin huddled in the conference room. Their expressions were grim, and occasionally, Travis would point to something on his laptop. My stomach tightened. I'd been in this industry long enough to recognize when the axe was about to fall. Instead of waiting passively, I decided to protect myself, not out of paranoia, but prudence. I had built Weston's contract infrastructure, negotiated its most valuable partnerships, and created the legal framework that protected the company's interests. If they planned to discard me, I would ensure they understood exactly what they were losing. Over the next 3 evenings, I methodically downloaded all essential contract documentation to an encrypted drive over 200 agreements totaling more than $9 million in business relationships. I carefully organized them in a folder labeled Holiday Catering Menu 2016, knowing no one would look twice at such an innocuous title. Each contract bore my signature as the authorized company representative. More importantly, buried in my employment agreement was Clause 8B, a provision I had negotiated years ago that specified if my employment was terminated without a proper separation agreement, all signing authority would be automatically revoked and could not be transferred for 30 days. It was intended as protection against abrupt dismissals affecting ongoing negotiations, but now it would serve a different purpose. The following Monday, Travis called an impromptu organizational alignment meeting in the open floor area. As staff gathered, I noticed several unfamiliar faces from HR hovering near the edges. As part of our ongoing efficiency initiatives, Travis announced, we're restructuring several key roles to better align with our strategic objectives. He continued with corporate platitudes about optimizing resource allocation and streamlining decision pathways. Then, almost as an afterthought, Rachel Monroe's position has been eliminated, effective immediately. The room went silent. Colleagues avoided my gaze, staring at their shoes, or suddenly fascinated by ceiling tiles. Catherine stood behind Travis, her expression a carefully crafted mask of professional regret. HR Director Julia Winters stepped forward, handing me a manila folder. This contains the necessary paperwork. We'll need your badge and company equipment before you leave. What about severance? I asked calmly. Travis cleared his throat. Given the restructuring nature of this separation, standard severance provisions do not apply. It's all outlined in the documentation. I opened the folder and scanned the termination letter. No severance, no extended benefits, not even the courtesy of advance notice after 7 years of service. Just a clinical severance of professional ties, effective immediately. I signed where indicated, requested a copy for my records, and smiled a small, knowing smile that seemed to unsettle Travis. He likely expected tears, protests, or anger. Instead, he got calm acceptance that, had he known me better, would have worried him far more than any emotional outburst. Escorted by security, I gathered my personal belongings photos, awards, and the jade plant I'd nurtured since my first day. As I walked out through the glass doors for the last time, I felt strangely weightless. They thought they were cutting dead weight. In reality, they had just severed the central support beam of their entire contract infrastructure. 2 days later, while enjoying my morning coffee at home, my phone exploded with notifications. Former colleagues were messaging me frantically. Something's wrong with the contract system. Vendors are calling about authorization issues. Legal is flipping out. From what I gathered through these messages, the contract management system had locked down. Amber, my inexperienced replacement, couldn't process pending transactions. Vendors were refusing to ship critical research materials because they didn't recognize the new signature authority. And most deliciously ironic, a random federal contract audit had been scheduled with no one having proper authority to present the required documentation. Penny from accounting, who had always been kind to me, forwarded an email chain showing the growing panic. From Travis Dale to its support, legal, Catherine Walsh. Subject urgent contract system access. Need immediate resolution to contract system lockout. Multiple vendors requiring authorized signatory verification. Amber doesn't have necessary credentials. System rejecting override attempts. From Simon Parker Legal to Travis Dale, Catherine Walsh. IT support, subject urgent, contract system access. This is more than a technical issue. According to our records, Rachel Monroe was the registered authorized signatory on 78% of our active contracts. We can't simply reassign without vendor acknowledgement and potentially contract amendments. Where is her transition documentation? From Catherine Walsh to Travis Dale, Simon Parker, IT support, subject urgent contract system access. Travis, didn't you handle the transition plan? We're getting calls from Mendoza Labs about their 1.2 meter supply agreement. They're threatening to halt shipment. I read these exchanges from a quiet coffee shop in Wimberley, a small town outside Austin where I'd retreated to decompress. The espresso tasted particularly good that morning as I browsed job listings without urgency. My financial situation was comfortable. I had always been careful with money, and my skills were in high demand. By day 5 of what employees were now calling Contract Gate, the situation had escalated dramatically. CEO Martin Glass, returning early from a conference in Portugal, discovered that his efficiency consultant had effectively paralyzed the company's ability to conduct business. My phone rang with a number I immediately recognized Martin's direct line. "Rachel," he said when I answered, his voice a mixture of frustration and forced cordiality. "We need to discuss the current situation." "Which situation would that be, Martin?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. "I've just returned to absolute chaos. Nobody can access critical contracts. Vendors are halting deliveries, and apparently, there's a federal audit team arriving Monday that we're completely unprepared for." "That sounds challenging," I replied neutrally. Martin sighed heavily. "Look, there's been a misunderstanding. Travis's restructuring recommendations were implemented prematurely. I never authorized termination without proper transition planning. Yet here we are. Rachel, we need you to help us resolve this. The company is facing significant operational risks. I'm not sure what you expect me to do. Martin, I'm no longer a Weston employee. As you may recall, I was escorted out by security without severance after 7 years of building your contract management framework." Silence stretched between us. Then, "What would it take to bring you back as a consultant to resolve this situation?" This was the moment I'd anticipated, not with malice, but with the clear-eyed knowledge that my value would suddenly become apparent once the consequences of my absence materialized. "I don't return to places that burned me to keep themselves warm. Martin?" "Name your price," he said, desperation edging into his voice. "This isn't about money. It's about respect and recognition of value. You allowed a consultant who doesn't understand your business to dismantle a critical function without proper assessment of the consequences. I made a mistake," Martin admitted, "but we need to fix this. The board is asking questions. Customers are threatening to leave, as they should be. Contract integrity is the foundation of business relationships. When you break that trust, there are consequences." I ended the call, then opened my laptop and forwarded Martin an email. Attached was a screenshot of the contract dashboard still showing my name as the sole authorized representative for all major agreements. 3 weeks after my unceremonious dismissal, I updated my LinkedIn profile, Rachel Monroe, Contract Management Director at Kelvra Solutions, Weston's main competitor. 2 of Weston's largest clients had already followed me, citing concerns about contractual continuity and governance. My new office featured large windows, a private coffee machine, and a significant signing bonus. On my monitor, a notification appeared, an automated alert about Weston Dynamics' continued non-compliant contract status. I smiled at the small yellow sticky note affixed to my screen. A personal reminder of the lesson I hoped Travis and Martin had learned. I was the contract. You just signed your failure. But my story doesn't end with revenge. It's about recognition, about companies learning that institutional knowledge isn't a legacy cost to be eliminated, but a valuable asset to be protected. Some lessons are expensive. For Weston Dynamics, this one cost $9 million. 3 months into my new role at Kelvra, I'd already restructured their contract management system, implementing safeguards and efficiencies that Weston had benefited from for years. My new CEO, Elise Huang, valued my expertise and consulted me on strategic decisions. The difference in culture was palpable at Kelvra. Experience wasn't a liability, but a competitive advantage. Meanwhile, Weston struggled to recover. Through industry connections, I heard they'd hired 3 consultants to rebuild what I had constructed alone. Travis had been quietly let go, and Martin was facing difficult questions from the board about the company's sudden performance decline. I didn't take pleasure in their struggles. Business isn't personal, despite what happened to me. but I did take satisfaction in knowing that my value had been definitively proven not through arguments or presentations, but through the undeniable consequences of my absence. One evening, as I was leaving the office, my phone buzzed with a text from Catherine, my former boss at Weston. "You were right. I should have stood up for you. I'm sorry." I appreciated her acknowledgement, but didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, aren't meant to be rebuilt. Instead, I focused on constructing something new and better, a system where experience was valued, where professionals weren't discarded as legacy bottlenecks, and where the true cost of institutional knowledge was properly recognized. In the end, Travis and Martin taught me a valuable lesson. Know your worth, document your value, and never stay where you're not appreciated. Sometimes, being fired is the best thing that can happen. It forces you to find somewhere that recognizes what you bring to the table. As for Clause 8b, the provision that gave me leverage when I needed it most, I made sure my new contract at Kelvra included similar protections. Not because I expected history to repeat itself, but because I had learned that in business, as in life, the fine print matters. The story of how Weston Dynamics lost $9 million in contract control became something of a legend in Austin's biotech community, a cautionary tale about the hidden costs of corporate efficiency. For me, it was simply the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another, far better one. I don't think about Travis much these days, but sometimes when I'm signing a particularly valuable contract for Kelvra, I smile and remember the look on his face during that last meeting, so confident he was cutting costs, so unaware he was actually severing the company's lifeline. That Tuesday morning when I first met Travis over video conference now seems like a lifetime ago. The woman who sat nervously as he labeled her a legacy bottleneck has been replaced by someone who knows exactly what she brings to the table and expects to be compensated accordingly. "Rachel, we need your input on the Meridian acquisition," Elise says, poking her head into my office. "Their contract structure is creative, to say the least." "I'll be right there," I respond, closing the file I've been reviewing. As I walk to the conference room, I pass a wall of photos showing Kelvra's leadership team. My face is among them now, no longer hidden in the background, no longer treated as disposable. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about moving forward, finding your true value, and leaving those who failed to see it wondering what might have been. And as for that $9 million in contracts, Weston eventually stabilized their situation after 3 months of chaos, hundreds of thousands in consultant fees, and the permanent damage to several key client relationships. Some lessons are expensive, but necessary. The morning after my dismissal from Weston, I'd woken up feeling something unexpected relief. For years, I'd poured my expertise and dedication into a company that ultimately saw me as nothing more than a line item to be eliminated. Walking away from that environment, even involuntarily, felt like escaping a slowly tightening trap. My phone rang as I was settling into my workspace at Kelvra. The caller ID showed Amber Patel, the young marketing assistant who'd been thrust into my role at Weston. "Rachel, it's Amber. I hope it's okay that I called." "Of course, Amber. How are you holding up?" I asked, genuinely concerned. She had been placed in an impossible position. "Honestly terrible. They're blaming me for not being able to fix the contract system." Her voice trembled. "I never claimed I could do your job. I was just trying to help with some basic document processing like Travis asked." "It's not your fault, Amber. You were set up to fail." "I'm thinking of leaving. The environment has gotten really toxic. Do you have any advice?" I thought carefully before responding. Despite everything, I didn't want to encourage negative feelings. Document everything, update your resume with the skills you've gained, and remember that your worth isn't determined by impossible expectations others set for you. "Thank you. That means a lot, especially coming from you." After we hung up, I reflected on how corporate cost-cutting often creates casualties at all levels, from experienced directors to junior staff thrown into roles they're not prepared for. The damage extends far beyond balance sheets. At Kelvra, I made it my mission to build not just robust systems, but also proper knowledge transfer protocols. I established mentorship programs and succession planning that respected both experience and fresh perspectives. When Elise asked about my unusual focus on these elements, I simply said, I've seen what happens when companies treat people as replaceable parts. 6 months after joining Kelvra, we were invited to bid on a major contract with Meridian Pharmaceuticals, formerly one of Weston's exclusive clients. The RFP contained technical specifications that required intimate knowledge of Meridian's existing systems, knowledge I had from my previous role. This feels like it was written specifically for you, Elise observed during our strategy meeting. Perhaps, I acknowledged, but we should win it on merit, not inside information. We prepared a proposal that addressed Meridian's needs without leveraging confidential knowledge from my time at Weston. When we won the contract worth $4.2 million over 3 years, it was because we offered genuine value, not because of corporate espionage. That victory felt sweeter than any revenge fantasy I might have harbored in those first bitter days after my dismissal. Success truly is the best response to disrespect. Around the 1-year anniversary of what my colleagues now jokingly called my corporate jailbreak, I received an unexpected email from Martin Glass. The subject line read simply, Lessons Learned. Rachel, it began, I won't ask for forgiveness, but I want you to know that your departure fundamentally changed how Weston operates. We've implemented new policies requiring executive review of all termination decisions for employees with more than 5 years of service. Your situation exposed a critical flaw in our approach to institutional knowledge. I regret that it took losing you to learn this lesson. I appreciated his acknowledgement but felt no urge to respond. Some chapters are best left closed. Instead, I focused on the future. Kelvra was growing rapidly, partly due to the robust contract management infrastructure I'd established. We had recently opened a new research facility in Boston and were exploring international expansion. During a leadership retreat in the Hill Country, Elise pulled me aside. The board has approved a new position, Chief Operations Officer. I'd like you to consider it. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Weston had viewed my experience as a liability, Kelvra saw it as a qualification for advancement. I'd be honored, I replied. That evening, as we gathered around a bonfire, sharing stories and vision for the company's future, I reflected on the winding path that had led me here. Travis's attempt to eliminate a legacy bottleneck had inadvertently launched me into a role with greater responsibility, compensation, and respect. Perhaps I should send him a thank you note, I thought with amusement. Life has a strange way of redirecting us when we need it most. Being fired without severance had felt like an ending, but it was merely a transition to something better. A workplace that valued experience, respected expertise, and understood that true efficiency comes not from eliminating institutional knowledge, but from leveraging it. As the new COO of Kelvra Solutions, I made it my mission to ensure that no employee would ever be dismissed as casually as I had been. We implemented robust performance review systems, transparent communication channels, and meaningful separation protocols for those rare instances when employment relationships needed to end. Occasionally, I still receive messages from former Weston colleagues seeking opportunities at Kelvra. I evaluate each on their merits, never holding their past affiliation against them. After all, many were simply caught in the same toxic environment I had escaped. Travis, I heard, had moved on to optimize another company, though his LinkedIn profile mysteriously omitted Weston from his experience. Catherine eventually left to join a smaller biotech startup, sending me a brief note that read only, I learned the hard way what happens when you don't stand up for your team. Martin remained at Weston. Though industry rumors suggested the board had significantly curtailed his authority after the contract incident cost the company millions in emergency consulting fees and lost business opportunities. As for me, I discovered that professional value, once truly recognized, creates a foundation for growth that no corporate efficiency expert can dismantle. My office at Kelvra features a small jade plant, a descendant of the one I carried out of Weston on that fateful day. It thrives in its new environment, just as I have. When new hires join my team, I tell them our core philosophy. We don't have legacy systems here. We have foundations of experience upon which we continue to build. It's a subtle reference to the legacy bottleneck label that once stung but now amuses me. The contract management system I built at Kelvra has become an industry benchmark, featured in case studies and professional journals. Occasionally, I'm asked to speak at conferences about the importance of institutional knowledge in corporate governance. I never mention Weston by name in these talks, but those familiar with the industry know the story behind my insights. Life after being fired without severance has turned out better than I could have imagined. Not because of the specific job I landed, but because the experience taught me to value myself when others failed to do so. The $9 million in contracts that Weston temporarily lost control of were eventually stabilized. But the true cost of their decision in damaged client relationships, lost opportunities, and diminished market position far exceeded that figure. Sometimes, late at night when I'm reviewing particularly complex agreements, I remember that moment in the open office when Travis announced my position had been eliminated. The shock, the hurt, the uncertainty. Then I look around at my executive office, at the team I've built, at the respect I've earned, and I smile. Being undervalued was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to find somewhere that recognized my worth, and in doing so, I discovered that the true value of experience isn't measured in years or titles, but in the problems you can solve and the systems you can build when given the proper resources and respect. 1 year to the day after my dismissal from Weston, I received a package. Inside was a sleek plaque from the Austin Business Journal naming me one of the city's top executives to watch. The accompanying note from Elise read, "Some people watch, others lead. Thank you for leading us forward." I displayed it prominently, not out of vanity but as a reminder that value, like truth, eventually finds its way to the surface. Travis had called me a legacy bottleneck. In the end, the only thing bottlenecked was Weston's progress after losing the institutional knowledge they had so carelessly discarded. As the Austin biotech community continues to evolve, I occasionally cross paths with former Weston executives at industry events. There's no animosity now, just the quiet acknowledgement that business decisions have consequences beyond the immediate balance sheet. Martin approached me at an industry gala last month, glass of champagne in hand. "You've done well for yourself, Rachel," he said, a hint of regret in his voice. "I have," I agreed simply. "Kelvra is fortunate to have you." "Yes," I replied, "they are." Nothing more needed to be said. The contrast between our company's trajectories spoke volumes. While Weston had stagnated, Kelvra had doubled its market share under leadership that valued experience alongside innovation. The lesson, ultimately, wasn't about contracts or clauses or even the $9 million that temporarily hung in limbo. It was about recognition, about understanding that employees aren't interchangeable parts, but individuals whose knowledge and expertise constitute a significant portion of a company's true value. Being fired without severance taught me that lesson from the receiving end. Leading Kelvra allowed me to implement it from a position of authority. And watching the subsequent divergence in our company's fortunes confirmed its truth beyond any doubt. So if you find yourself suddenly deemed a legacy bottleneck by someone who doesn't understand your value, remember my story. Know your worth, document your contributions, and if necessary, let them learn the hard way that experience isn't a liability. It's one of the most valuable assets any organization can possess. Because sometimes, the person signing the termination papers doesn't realize they're actually signing their own failure until it's too late. The jade plant on my desk has grown substantially over the years. Its branches extend in all directions, thriving in the sunlight that streams through my corner office windows. Like me, it found a better place to grow after being uprooted. And that, perhaps, is the most important lesson of all. Sometimes being cut loose is exactly what you need to reach your full potential. I still have that yellow sticky note, now framed on my wall alongside my achievements and credentials. I was the contract. You just signed your failure. Not as a reminder of bitterness, but as acknowledgement of a fundamental truth in business and in life. Value recognized is value amplified. Value dismissed doesn't disappear. It simply finds appreciation elsewhere. And somewhere in Austin, in the glass offices of Weston Dynamics, I like to think there's a lesson still reverberating through their halls, long after my departure. Before you eliminate what you perceive as a bottleneck, make sure you understand what's actually flowing through it.